I'm really delighted on this occasion when we are celebrating the Millennium Makers of India. And on my side, I must say, if there's one person I've always looked up to in terms of building India and building the financial sector of India, it is you. And before we get into the more current subject, I would like to ask you about a little bit of your personal history and how HDFC evolved over the last 35, 40 years. And it's one of the most amazing stories of making of India, including the fact that I believe before HDFC you were working in another foreign bank before that. So the whole quick, for the purpose of benefit of history of Deepak Parekh.
I think this is our 37th year in operation. We started in 1977, and that time no one had ventured, no one had endeavored to do retail loans. There was no long-term finance available. There was no foreclosure laws. And at that stage, it was ICICI who thought that this is a good business to get into retail. Retail lending was unheard of in India. And that's the time when I was in Chase Manhattan. I was running the Chase office here, and they transferred me to Saudi Arabia, which is an oil-rich country where you get 2 months annual leave. The attraction was 2 months annual leave, because the Americans did not want to go to Saudi Arabia those days. I'm talking of 37 years ago, the first oil boom. And so I had a choice between going to Saudi Arabia or join this new institution. So I'm glad I decided not to go to Saudi Arabia. That's when I left Chase and joined this. See, there was a need for housing finance because people don't have large money to put in a house. Housing is the largest investment a family makes in his or her lifetime. And you need institutional support, you need banking support for them to pay over a period of time. Why pay rent every month and not EMI and own the own house? So this concept was there. It has worked all over the world, but not in India. Now the main reason it did not work in India, why did, suppose Kotak Bank was there that time, why did State Bank did not do housing loans at that stage, or any nationalized bank or any foreign bank? Because there was only fixed rate lending. There was no concept in India of a variable rate loans, floating rate loans. A bank would not be able to give a 15-year fixed rate loan. So we had to borrow long-term money in those days and give fixed rate loans. The floating rate came only in the end of 1990, when that's the time when the variable rate interest phenomenon, and that was the time when the banks got into housing finance. So there were reasons why banks were excluded or banks did not pursue this. Now today they are pursuing it very, very, very actively. And if you see foreign institutions, if you see US banks or European banks, mortgage finance is a very big chunk in their total lending portfolio. In fact, the outstanding mortgages are more than industrial lending. So it's a big part of a bank portfolio. It was not in India, and now you will see in India over the years that mortgage will become a very, very important item in a bank's balance sheet. If you just look at housing as a percentage of GDP, is a good number to look at. It's 9% in India. It's still single digit. It is 18% in China. It is 25% in Thailand. It is 35% in Malaysia, and 80s and 90s in US and UK and Denmark and all that. So we have a long, long way to go. From 9 we can easily get to 20 in 10 years' time. When we started 37 years ago, it was 2% of GDP. So in 37 years, it's moved from 2 to 9. So look at the scope in this business. The scope is enormous.
If you just look at, as I'm moving from the history of HDFC to the history, in a way, the development of India. In this period, 77 to 2015, you've seen enormous change in the political and economic landscape of India. And you have been a part of that journey. You've dealt with a number of governments. You have been very bold and forthright in expressing your views across governments. As you look at this evolution of Indian polity and economy, sitting where you are, how do you sort of, number one, look at history and judge it in the context of where we go from here on a political economic basis, the broad Indian story, because there are many, many people here who would love to get your view and relate the past into the future.
I'll just say a few words on the earlier question that in any financial sector, conservatism has to be the hallmark of an organization. And you cannot be over-aggressive in a financial sector.
Right, right.
And many people have burned themselves when they've been very aggressive. So apart from having a customer-centric, ethical culture, it comes from the top. From the top, one has to be aware what is happening in the organization, and one must have a clean record.
Right.
And otherwise you get into trouble in this business. On your question, I think the best days in India are yet to come, and I'm convinced. Unfortunately, I may not be alive to see some of the better days that come, but at least I'm happy to think that they are going to come, and I'm convinced they will come. I think we have a strong government. We have a leader who leads from the front. They have the right intent of on number of issues of ease of doing business, of setting up manufacturing, of creating jobs, single window clearance. I can go on and on. And even in our state in Maharashtra, I was very enthused to read what our Chief Minister wants to do in this city and in the state. I think this city, the commercial capital, is the most neglected city in the country. And it gives the maximum revenue to the center. And yet people have not invested. The government has not invested. I think this Chief Minister is a breath of fresh air. He comes with no baggage, and I'm sure he will do wonders in the next 5 years. So I'm hopeful that India will do much better. I'm not saying we'll get to 10% next year. It's a slow climb. You cannot expect in a large country like ours, in a poor country like ours, to see GDP growth rates going 2%, 3%. It's a 1% a year climb. I think in 5 years we can get to 8, 9, 9%. So we cannot expect to jump. But I think slow and steady wins the race. And I think government means business. The Prime Minister is very keen, and he's very straightforward, and he's business-minded. And you know the number of hours he works, and he's really revolutionized the ministries, the bureaucrats. You go to Delhi, you can get appointments at 9 a.m. now. You don't have to wait till 11. So, you know, things are different in Delhi, and people are working, and it's good for India. I think it's very good. That's why I'm very optimistic. You know, in a country like ours, we may not be able to see the progress on the ground level immediately. And I've heard people complaining that nothing has changed. Auto sales have not increased. FMCG sales have not increased. It takes time. And I think the finance minister keeps saying that I want to put more money in the consumer's pockets. I want more savings. You know, we could not have had a better time now when all commodity prices are all-time low. Oil, which is our biggest weakness, is 50% lower. We will save in a full year more than $50 billion on import of oil if it remains at today's level. It's a huge plus for India. Coal, we have large coal reserves, but we are one of the largest importers of coal. Coal prices have come down 45%. All this helps India. And we should, you know, with right policies, good governance, and with international pricing, commodity pricing helping us, I think there's no place better than India today to invest. I'm convinced about it.
One of the things that you alluded to is the perception that we have the new government's vision and talk has been excellent. More needs to be seen on the walk. And in that context, the fact that there is vision, there's a strong project management approach, the whole strategic architectural piece, do you think the government has enough muscle and brain power to really get the strategic architecture piece, the piece in the middle between Modi's vision and strong project management?
See, the growth happens in the states, not in the center. So center can lay down policies, center can push the states to do things. The growth, the development, the progress has to happen in the states. So you will see that states, well-run states with dynamic chief ministers will do much better than other states. And there is little influence what the center can do to the states other than push them and keep pushing them. So I would say that the BJP government has definitely a much larger clout on the BJP states. And you will see the BJP states doing well because they will be directed from the center if they don't follow the policies of the government, whether it's single window or e-tendering or for all government contracts. They're talking of e-tendering. Maharashtra government, the chief minister said anything the government orders over 3 lakhs of rupees is going to be on e-tender basis. 3 lakhs of rupees on e-tender. So it's totally transparent process. I think this is the best news I've seen, I've heard. And from April 1, he says we will institute this in Maharashtra. So I guess the states have to implement the policies, and the Prime Minister or the center is very little they can do. Fine, some of the ministers in the center maybe are first-time ministers. And so they'll take time to come to grips. So we have to give them time. I think 6-7 months in a 5 years' time is too short a time. So I feel that we should give 6 more months, and you will see distinct changes on the ground level. And the economic policy that we will see later on here this month, and the railway budget and the finance minister's budget will be the key documents that will see India's progress over the next few years. The direction, the emphasis on number of issues, how to have not a hostile tax department, how to have a simple tax laws, how not to scare foreign companies with taxation demands. You will see a lot of things in this budget, and I'm looking forward. I've never looked forward for a budget as much as this time.
CNBC TV 18, celebrating 15 years of leadership.
If we move to the financial sector, and I'm looking at the broader financial sector, banking and all, the overall financial sector, including the state-owned banks, and particularly, investors have looked at the recent results, quarterly results, both from public sector banks and even some from private sector. How do you see the whole financial sector play out as we look at the next 12 to 18 months? And then also beyond that, the long-term fact that state-owned banks are 75% of the system, how do you see the overall big picture financial sector?
I think one must take it for granted that in the financial sector, the private sector is going to play a larger role than it has played in the past, whether it's in mutual fund, insurance companies or banks.
Right.
If you see in life insurance companies, already all private sector life insurance companies are almost doing 40-45% of new business. And these numbers are going to go up. Same thing in non-life. Public sector banks may have 75% of the banking sector advances, but since there are more players and more private sector players and not that many new public sector players, the share of public sector has to come down. And this is a given fact. Like we had at once upon a time 100% of the housing market share. Today we have maybe 25% or 30% of the market. This is bound to happen. So I think public sector government must accept that it is public sector share is going to come down. So if they want to use public sector banks for their own purposes of rural development or job creation or anything, they'll have to think it through. How do they get private sector banks into it? Because we are accountable to our shareholders. Public sector banks, though they are listed, predominantly they are the government arms. So you will see more competition, you will see more players, like you will see by the end of this year, new payment banks, new small banks. Now the move of the Reserve Bank, according to me, is they are encouraging new banks. May not be universal banks, may not be large banks, small banks. The worry which we have is that NBFCs should not overtake the financial sector. Informal banking that has really created problems in China, what is dreaded to be a major problem issue in China. 1/3 of the Chinese market is an informal finance sector. I don't think we can afford to do that, and I think the regulators and the government, finance ministry, are well aware of it.
the development of the public sector banks as they need more capital for growth, and then the 51% issue. How do you see, what are the options, and how do you see in the context of the politics?
I think government has number of options. They have to bite the bullet. The first option really is every public sector bank government holding will come down to 51%. Because today there are many banks with 60-70%. So that's the step one. Once they come down to 51%, what is the next way to raise money? You know, they can issue non-voting shares. These are things talked about. They can issue voting and non-voting. Non-voting shares can have a discount to the price. And some companies, some individuals, some FIs may be interested in buying non-voting shares. Anyway, today very few people vote at AGMs. So you have a right to vote, but no one goes and votes. So that's another option. That's one option. Then, you know, you talked about, or maybe you have recommended to the government that have a holding company and sell those shares, all bank shares in a holding company, and divest those so the banks will get money. So indirectly, you still have over 51%. Investment arm where all government holdings will go in, and that's another option. Preference shares is another option.
What do you feel about that option?
I don't think it's a good option.
I agree. I agree with you.
I hope you have not recommended.
I have not recommended it. So I agree with you on that.
I don't think it's an option.
Because if somebody wants to buy State Bank, will have to buy all the banks together.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it's a good option at all. I hope they don't do that. But you know, the best would be if they take a view that we'll go down to 40%.
Yeah.
Over 3 years. And they can go down to 40% and yet have they're the single largest shareholder. They can have the same influence.
Do you think they can get it done politically?
Political issue is there, but I think with such a large majority in the Lok Sabha, after 2 years, when the Rajya Sabha majority comes to them, it will be much easier for them to do it. They can still have the same controls that they have today, except a slightly lower shareholding. But insurance and asset management are huge growth drivers. You will see insurance penetration in India is very low. We have missold insurance in the last 10 years. And so people have a bad experience of insurance. But I think if every individual who borrows money for a home takes an insurance policy, if anything happens to him, the loan is written off. It's a no-brainer. But still we are unable to convince the borrower that why don't you take an insurance cover with it? You know, so we have to do this education to our people, why insurance is such an excellent product. You have tax planning, you have safety, you have so many issues, and a saving instrument. But I'm sure as we go on, the penetration in insurance has to go up. And asset management, you see in the last few months, we see a large number of retail investors coming back to the mutual fund industry, which is very positive. So these two areas, life, non-life, asset management, are real growth areas.
No, I completely agree. And therefore, if I now, in the context of the fact that you see a very positive outlook for India, you see the financial sector, especially the other parts of the financial sector, insurance, asset management, other areas also moving forward. In that context, next 5 years for HDFC Group?
Business as usual. Keep growing all the arms of the company, all the group.
More excited about which arm?
All arms. We are number 2, number 3 in group. In life we are number 2, in individual we are number 3. We have a target to be number 2. Asset management we are the largest. Bank has done exceptionally well. And so I think we are doing, we have some companies where we need to concentrate some. You know, we have a company called HDFC Red, which very few people have heard of. It's an online HDFC business. We are getting many private equity players coming and saying, we'll give you this value and that value. I don't see any value in it today, but they see value in it. They see value in it, so we have to take a decision what we need to do with those, because we are building it gradually. It's 100% owned by us. So we have some education loan that's done very well, Credila. And again, there we've got PEs coming because we have 90% of it. That give us a chunk of that and a slice of that. And again, they're valuing it, although it's 1.5, 2 years old. They're giving us fancy valuations. So we have some options to grow some of these new businesses.
So when do you merge?
We merge in the long run, as I said to one of the investors this morning, it makes sense in the long run to merge, provided the circumstances are in our favor and there is no loss of value to either shareholder, either the bank shareholder or the HDFC shareholder. We are very clear, and every analyst has already merged us. So it's a fait accompli so far as the analysts are concerned, but we have recently raised money in the bank.
Yes.
In the prospectus.
Small amount of money.
Small amount. In the prospectus, we have said nothing about it. So we cannot merge tomorrow because it's not fair.
Yeah.
It's not ethical. So I don't think it will happen in 2015. We have to wait to see the right opportunity when it makes sense for both of us.
Great. With that, thank you very much,
Thank
Deepak
you.
Bhai.
Thank you.
We are very, very proud of what you have built over the years. Thank you. Thank you very much.
CNBC TV 18, celebrating 15 years of leadership.